Get in touch with
So,
us.
do we want to get into the main thing of the show, or do we want to
Yes.
talk about our going over the homework from last week first? Or do we want to
We
leave that
do-
to when we do homework right at
Do
the end?
homework at the end of the
Let's
stream.
do
We'll
that.
leave it to the end,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah,
we
whatever.
do like did
Yeah.
people do it, and then we do the new one, right?
Yeah.
But Tim,
Mm.
what's interesting is that you were speaking, which means that now I'm speaking to you and asking you to read out the introduction from the notes.
Okay.
So now tell us about the topic.
All right, cool.
There we go.
Here we go. Introduction there. So, from ACAB to who do you protect, who do you serve, to abolish private property. A lot of leftist rhetoric and slogans can be confusing to newcomers, and issues can seem disparate and hard to follow. However, all the above ties back to the same central idea. Police exist to protect private property, because the ownership of private property underpins the state. Capitalism, economic oppression, and many of history's greatest crimes. It would be an understatement to call private property one of the most important issues anti-capitalists can educate themselves on, and today we're looking at people who engage in action that directly opposes private property. Squatters. There we go. Squatters.
yeah.
I love
There we
that.
go.
I
was
love that,
incredible.
Tim. That was
Can we
phenomenal.
get some squatting in chat?
I was writing the intro and I was imagining it in Tim's voice, and I was so glad that
no.
Tim spoke, because I was like, oh, now I can get Tim to do it.
I've been getting lots of comments lately in my stream chat, because I stream late at night and everyone's like, it's story time hour.
Your stream is
Aw.
very soothing. I highly recommend
Yeah, it
tuning
really
into, especially if you're in America. It's at a late time. It's
Yeah,
nice
yeah,
to put it on
totally.
and just have a friend have a very soothing bassy voice, say things. I don't know. Compare that to my stream where I'm shrieking. Not recommended. It's nighttime.
That shit's got its place, you know?
That's
valid.
true.
Let's start with
That's
some-
true. Very true.
Ones and zeros checking in chat early here today, because I want to know how many people in chat know what squatting even is. So it's a 1 if you reckon you think you could explain it to somebody else, and a 0 if you have no clue. And put whatever appropriate fraction if you want to, if you feel like you can do whatever you
Just
want.
so you
But I
know,
feel like
just
a
so
lot of people
everybody's
in chat
aware,
seem to know.
Got the
we're
lens.
not talking about the exercise.
Yeah,
We're not talking about
Yeah.
we're not talking about
Yeah.
getting some
Correct.
weights on you.
Now maybe
and
that
going
would change your vote.
If
might
you
have to
watch
redo
Bad
it.
Bunny, you will know. You will know.
What we're
which
actually
exercise we
talking
need.
about is the time-honored Slavic tradition of donning an Adidas tracksuit
Yes.
and
yes,
squatting.
yes.
What do we say? What's the saying about what's the saying about squatting? I'm sure someone else knows it. Yeah, see, Nicole knows what it is. She probably knows the saying I'm thinking of now. But there's about what is it? It's about where you put your heels when you squat.
Heels on the ground,
Right.
comrade found. Heels in the sky, Western spy.
There we go.
Yeah.
There we go.
Yeah.
So to do the proper
Yeah.
Slav squat, you got to be sitting down with your heels on
Correct.
the ground,
Or else
so that
Yeah.
the lines from the side of your Adidas track pants line up with the lines on the side of your Adidas sneakers.
Adidas.
That's right.
Correct.
Fucking love it.
The correct squatting. The correct Slav
Tragically for me, having just bought a 16-kilo kettlebell this week, doing a lot of exercise to give yourself a huge dump truck ass will not on its own abolish private property. So,
Well,
But
we
it
need a
hurt.
new plan.
It can't
So-
hurt.
fuck. When she's right, she's
Yeah.
right. And you have
Because
to
when the
say
cops
it.
roll in and they see that ass, they're like, wait a minute.
Yeah. This has been Bad Bunny's plan all along. Yeah.
This is true.
So Tim, could you tell us what squatting, which kind of squatting we are talking about this week?
Okay, so we're actually talking about the practice of occupying a space, like outside of the consent of the owners, I would say, is a way to put it. Because it's not always technically illegal, So just like occupying a space that you don't own, someone else owns it. And yeah, I mean, a successful squat usually ends up sometimes ends up in the transfer of ownership to the squatters. And yeah, there's a lot of nuance depending on where you are in the world. There's different rules for it everywhere. A lot of the time there are, they try and make it as hard as possible, but there are kind of things you can do that, there's protections there for people squatting, but they tend to be as limited as possible.
Yes.
So what we're going to talk about is how it differs from place to place, and how people have used this in the past, or successfully, or maybe even unsuccessfully. And also kind of like there's a very basic idea of just occupying up space because you need somewhere to, some shelter to live in. But then there's like a whole other, like the I would say the political realm of reasons why someone might squat a house, a business, anything like that.
Yeah. I'm going to get in early with my book recommendations this time because I've got like one of the best book recommendations I could have for a topic, which is just a handbook for just how to do it. So the Squatter's Handbook, 14th edition. It's the 14th edition because they update every time there is a change to the law. This is UK specific and has to do with like what to do in the UK. But it's just basically based as fuck manual about how to squat, right? I'll just quickly go over to the notes so I can tell people about a little bit about what's in here. I know I usually just kind of I usually just kind of drop a book title and then let people go figure it out, but the ones I'm mentioning today, I'm really serious about people reading, so I'm going to tell people a little bit about what's in here. The contents of this book. We got homeless rights. It goes over the legality around homelessness and why, if you're looking for the legal protections that you can get if you apply successfully and a recognized homeless status, then you can't be squatting. Basically, it's like there's a little precursor where they're just basically like, before you decide to go squatting, if you are homeless, blah blah blah. Property guardianship. This is a really interesting one. Basically, property guardianship is class traitor bullshit. Basically,
I wondered about that because that's not a term I'd heard before, but then I saw it in the notes and had to look through, and I was like, I can't quite figure out what this is about. So, yeah,
it might be a UK specific phenomenon, but it's basically where, in theory, a building owner, like it's an abandoned building, it's exactly the kind that would get squatted in, right? But rather than wanting to pay a security guard who can't be there all the time and you have to pay them, they get people who are looking for cheaper rents to live there, in theory, for a cheaper rent, although often that's not even true. And then they basically have a job that goes in with the rent, in with the place they're paying rent for, where
taking care of the Overlook Hotel.
Oh, you literally, no, totally. That's exactly The family in The Shining are property guardians. Yeah.
Okay, all right.
I was telling
they were paid, right? Yes. Whereas property guardians have to pay to do it.
What?
Yeah.
Wow.
In many cases, like you're paying, but it's like you're paying a lower rent, and then sometimes it's not even.
Yeah. Wow.
I was telling Sophie and Nat when I went to see them. Wait, was that last weekend? Yeah, it was. Yep. Oh my god, fucking hell, brain. I was telling Sophie and Nat that I went to shoot a music video once in an old fucked up mansion near Liverpool. And the guy who let us shoot the music video there basically asked us to pay him like 50 quid for the day, basically. And that was what he did. He looked after this mansion. It was like an old Masonic mansion. He told us like all the history of it and all this stuff. And he was like, yeah, no one owns it. It's absolutely fucked. And it was falling to bits. Like, it was so unsafe in there. There were, like, warning signs in certain cupboards. He was yeah, don't go in there. There's asbestos and shit like
Jesus
that.
Christ.
Yeah, it was horrific. It's one of the best videos we've ever done. Yeah, one of the best videos I've ever done. But, yeah, it's an example, yeah.
So one of the great bits in this book is here where they say, in all caps and bold and italicized, so you really, really, really can't miss it. It says, we would not recommend becoming a property guardian. And then underneath regular text, it says, if you already are one but are curious about squatting instead, brackets, saving yourself money and gaining a lot of freedom, read on and contact us for advice about changing your status. So that's really cool. But I was reading through what is in this book because I want chat to know about it. Property guardianship, first steps to squatting, finding a place, securing it. They've got like diagrams and shit for how people create buttresses which like hold the door, the front door from getting battered in. Yeah. Like there is basically nothing.
This would be great even if like you weren't squatting, it was just like zombies or something, you know. Like...
I mean, honestly, it's honestly just a survival guide. There's nothing funnier to me than a squad of pigs using their battering ram and being unable to get in a door. So that's rad.
That would be funny.
put up those reinforcements.
Yeah.
Dealing with alarms, which is is a kind of funny gray legal thing, but if you are going to squat, it's going to something you're going to have to do. Then there's interesting legal stuff. So there's a section called proving it isn't residential, and this has to do with a law. Again, this is UK specific, but there's a thing called section 144, which is basically like our biggest shift in the law to make squatting fully illegal. But what they outlawed was living in a residential building without the owners, basically when you have no arrangement with the owner, right?
Oh, yeah.
But there are 3 cases where this doesn't apply, which is really interesting and what the book opens out with. And so one is if you're squatting in a building that wasn't actually designed to be residential. Like, so if there isn't like an abandoned factory and you can make it into a livable place for a ton of people to live, then you can do that in the UK. That's completely legal. Occupying a building for purposes other than living, and actually this is something that Tim brought up before. So like something they list is protest or a social center. So that's a really interesting thing. And actually there's an example of that in something else I'll talk about, which is the Volkshuset in Copenhagen. Like like squatting in a building, and then rather than just because you need to live there, turning it into a community center is really interesting and definitely aligns with a lot of what we've been talking about on Red Planet already, like in terms of creating communities of mutual aid, like
that, the McDonald's,
the McDonald's, yeah. Like you might not necessarily need a place to live, but you and all your comrades might have places to live, but you want to create a place where you can like get together, do reading group, make stuff, distribute things to people and organize, and like that. Maybe that's a reason to squat. Moving on from that, so the section is about proving it isn't a residential building, because that's one of the ways that you can make it legal squatting in the UK. How to deal with visitors coming to the place if you're living there, and then dealing with police, dealing with security guards, dealing with owners, all sections on that. They actually have a section to do with immigration and raids, which I thought was really, really amazing.
Oh, wow, yeah, cool.
And I'll just quickly mention what it says there. It has like a little bit about like what to do if you spot an immigration raid, like a step-by-step guide where it says like tell the person they don't have to answer questions, and it's like give them useful numbers, and it has the useful numbers to give them. And then there's a section called Be Creative, which has a funny picture in it, where someone's like climbed onto the cop van to stop it from being able to be driven away, which I just thought was very charming. Like, just like, oh, be creative, do whatever.
Yeah.
Anyway, so that was
can you tell
immigration.
the title of the book again for anyone who didn't catch it the first time? Because maybe
100%. It's this. Yeah, I hope so. Yeah, it's the Squatter's Handbook. Again, it's UK specific, but it is very, very, very detailed, as I hope I'm getting across. So as well as that, fixing the place up, like it teaches you how to do your wiring and stuff. Like it has a section about electricity.
That's incredible.
It has
something. A link in the chat now.
What a cool book!
It has something for like stuff to do in court, including, and I didn't know this. You are not obliged to show ID in court. You don't have to do that in UK. So if they probably need a name to refer to you in order to try a case or to do a case, right? So advice that this gives is like, if people call you some kind of nickname, it's fine to just give that, because the judge or whatever needs to call you something, but you don't have to give your ID or give your legal name, and saying I don't want to do that if they ask is fine. So
it's really fucking annoying as well when you get like so many people in the UK who love to be like, I'm a fucking sovereign citizen, you can't arrest me.
Yeah.
Like all this nonsense. And there's like actually based resources where you can like do that, but without sounding like a chump. You know what I mean? Like
when I was looking up to see cases of squatting in New Zealand, there is a person doing that. I think she's still going, doing the whole sovereign citizen thing. And she's like claiming like all these like like archaic laws that all these like legal experts are like, no, just like stuff like that, and they're like, no, like this thing is like a law that only applies in like fucking Scotland or some shit.
I'm trying not to. I don't want to get too derailed.
Yeah,
there is someone in the UK who like clearly has a bit of money. I wouldn't be surprised if this person's into crypto, but like is apparently a trans woman and is like a hyper libertarian. And like I first found out about her because she bought billboards around London that said your your real name is not your legal name, and then like the link to her website to look into stuff, and she was promoting all this like weird like common folklore, like
sovereign citizen
common
stuff?
law stuff. Like
Yeah,
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 it
Like
was
American
sovereign
sovereign
citizen. It was
citizens.
really interesting.
The common
Yeah.
law stuff is a giveaway for that kind of
Yeah.
shit, right? Like,
Yeah.
that's not saying common law. Yeah,
Yeah.
the person that I was referring to, same thing, right? Like, just,
Yeah.
it's like, there are things you can do,
Yes.
you know, to protect yourself, but that's not them.
Yeah, exactly.
It's
Just
sad because
saying,
these
I
people
don't
are running a
recognize the
million miles
law.
an hour, but in the wrong direction, innit? You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's like and I guess this is just a really important thing for us to establish as we go through the rest of the episode. Saying I don't recognize the law or the state is not going to really get you anywhere if you're trying to like successfully squat somewhere. Like, yes, you are trying to like, you know, make this thing yours and like have it be yours, right? But legally, you want to use every channel that could help you. So actually, like trying to prove it's legal under the state's law is much better avenue.
Absolutely, yeah.
At least unless you just live in the middle of a whole neighborhood that's got squatted. Like, you know, if there's a whole block of 10 neighborhoods that have got squatted, you're basically living in the revolutionary society, and then just fucking rock on.
It's
last
like
few
the
things that are
Matrix,
in this book. Yeah,
there's rules.
Last few things...
There's rules, but some can be bent and broken.
It's true. It's true.
Yeah.
Last two things that are in this book: railway property, gypsies and travelers, how to deal with debt collectors, injunctions, and then it's got organizing, and it has a section on resources, which I found incredibly cool. It mentioned Green and Black Cross, as we were previously shouted out on the show. One more time, that's the Squatter's Handbook, UK specific. If you are looking to squat, this has so much fucking information, and it updates every time there's a change. So to get your hands on a copy, it's really, really cool. But I think that's I think that was my book rec. I just wanted to like my first one. I have another one, but like that's the hyper important one.
It's like it's such a good book as well. I feel like it's one of those things where it's like, even if you're not planning on squatting anytime soon, there's so much good shit in there. Even like
I learned a lot.
Yeah, I saw someone in chat saying like, oh, you got to be careful with, you know, electrical stuff and that. But their book like covers stuff about like, you know, like how to repair wiring safely and doing things like that. So it's like, you know, it's something that you probably just want to have anyway, you know. Especially like we said, if the zombies come, you know. Like...
Yeah. I mean, to like offer a bit of an expert's opinion or whatever. Like, I studied electrical engineering in university. I dropped out in the second year, but I got enough knowledge to know like. What is covered here is a very safe and thorough and detailed guide. Like, it's one of the thickest sections of the book. If you read through that, you are not gonna like get yourself hurt unless the wiring has been done wrong, and that's, you know, I mean, that's just a roll of dice for anyone doing that. So I think should we talk about a little bit about like private property as a concept? Because I feel like when Amy gets here, we're gonna have a little bit more of a legal focused discussion and like kind of. But I just before that like.
We should
when we're talking
I was gonna say we should go over, just for everyone in chat, because I know this is something that like a lot of people get confused about, like the difference between like personal property and private property, and what private property means in relation to, you know, stuff. So sorry, I interrupted you, but go on.
Well, I just wanted to quickly say how squatting fits in very importantly with stuff we've been talking about on Red Planet for a while, which is like it fits in this closely. When I first started entertaining the idea of like, we should do Red Planet, like we should do some kind of thing that's like this, was when like patrons in my Patreon Discord were like, I understand these parts of like theory or whatever, but I don't understand how you go from the things that you start doing, like the small direct actions, to a world that's like coming together into communism.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, a lot of them are the same things. I definitely said some of this in episode 1, but like a lot of them are the same things. And squatting is like such a perfect example of that, where literally people are just taking properties that they need to live in, right? And that's why it's really important for us to cover, because we are living through yet another fucking housing crisis. I'm only 25. How many have I lived through now? A ton. Just a ton. Just so many. Loads. It's good. We're living through yet another fucking housing crisis, and I don't know if this one's gonna exactly end. Like, there's a really good bit in another book I'm gonna recommend where they point out that like for the poor and working class, the housing crisis is just the normal state of things, right? So it's about the number of people who are driven into poverty. It's not just like a thing that comes and goes. It's a thing that's there all the time. And sometimes it also affects the middle class. But like, as we are living through that, it's going to be really, really important for people to know there are other options besides working, 60 hours a week and then giving all your money to a landlord who doesn't even like stop the roof from leaking directly onto your bed,
Yeah.
Cool.
So private property.
Private property.
Yeah.
Personal property.
Okay, so this is like a thing, and it's like a thing that a lot of like kind of anti-communists or just like anti-leftists in general people will talk about. They'll be like, oh man, like communism or whatever they talk about, anarchism or whatever is opposed to private property. So you gotta like share your bed, you gotta you gotta like you got your favorite mug. Well, that's my favorite, that's our favorite mug now.
Anyone could just come into your house and sleep on your bed, and that's it. That's their house now.
Yeah, exactly. Like just shit like that, which is like, so that is personal property. So things like your favorite mug, your toothbrush, all that kind of stuff, that's personal property. It's like a physical object, like whatever that you use, an individual holds onto for their own private use or whatever like that. Your clothes, everything like that is personal property. So when we're talking about private property, what we're talking about is usually like it could be it could be land, it could be it's some kind of like a resource, a business, or like a method of generating income via via extraction or something like that. It could be like, if it's a mining company, the private property would be like the company and the tools, like the equipment and things like that.
And their land, obviously.
And the land that it's based on and everything like that.
Like,
so
if you've read the OG Conquest of Bread, the OG Peter Caprot's great work. He has a really good point in that where he says like, all of society contributes to like invention and progress, and what we think of as like, progress. And so like if someone's made, let's take for example something that's like, a huge leap forward for people, right? Like a loom. Like a loom is a huge leap forward technologically for people. If that was made, it wasn't made by a guy, right? It was made by the incremental changes of tons and tons of people who all learned the things that society had brought together as important knowledge. And so the idea of one person getting a loom and being like, this is mine, and anything that is made with it, you have to pay me just for owning it. Like, not for the labor of manufacturing it. Yeah.
This was made by the collective efforts of people that, were developing these things, thinking about these things before you even, were born or whatever like that. This is like the sum of, the working class.
I feel like a lot of people nowadays, especially conservatives, have this fear of the idea of losing their private property, because at the moment there is a what do you call it? An implied scarcity. It's a manufactured scarcity of housing, right?
Artificial.
So it's like, sure, like there's not enough houses for everyone because not everyone has the money to afford a house. But in a utopian communist future, everyone has a house, so it doesn't matter. You don't have to worry about someone coming and stealing your house because everyone's got one. Everyone's literally fucking got one. It doesn't matter.
I don't know if I'll be able to find it quickly, but there was a really a drawing in Squatter's Handbook, which is like a rough sleeper, and then like the skyline behind them, but it's made up of the words that are saying, like, the skyline is made up of the words 11 million empty properties, and then the rough sleeper is the words 4.1 million homes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, that's across Europe, to be clear, is what those figures are.
And I think, I was reading something earlier that was like, it's roughly about 10% of houses in America are untenanted, like completely empty. Like 10% of all houses is like wild. There's And I know in New Zealand, at the last census, there was something like 200,000 unoccupied houses, which, I mean, we only have a couple million people living in our country, so it's like 200,000 is huge for us.
That's like 10% of your
And most of them were in Auckland, where homelessness is the worst. Like which is like wild.
Which of course they were. Yeah.
Well,
this is an interesting thing. So that's like
a lot worse in those last couple, because I mean, like the last census was like 2018 or something. So.
Right. Yeah, and like this is a concept we will definitely, or I will be going on and on about throughout this episode, no doubt, which is a concept from urban geography, which is the right to the city. There was this essay by a guy called Henri Lefebvre. It's Lefebvre, which is a hell of a name to say if you don't speak French. And it was called The Right to the City. And basically it's about how how poor people made the city, just made the whole fucking, every city that exists, right? And everyone has a right to it. Very similar to what I was just saying from Kropotkin, right? It's just like everybody made this, everybody has a right to it. There's another kind of poetic piece of geography writing I really like. I couldn't find the exact quote, but like it basically describes the city as like, to human beings, the city is what like a tree with lots of nests in it is to birds, or like a warren is to rabbits. Like it is our natural environment. Like clearly we have some kind of force that makes us come together and like want to make a city, and it's not always capitalism. Like anthropologically, if you read a lot of Graeber, right, like it's not always capitalism that makes people want to come together and make a city. Human beings like to come together and make a city. And so there's this interesting idea, right? The right to the city. And I think that's something we need to talk about a lot today. Yeah. And that ties back to what you were saying earlier, Tim, that a lot of the time when people squat, they just need somewhere to live.
Yeah. And I want to also shout out that we got Lost Sue in chat who mentioned in real land back, everyone has a house or home and much more. And so that's a thing. Like the goal of a lot of like actual real land back movements is a decommodification of land and housing. And so in some areas where various groups have actually managed to, claim back sort of ancestral land, we have seen a lot of like community housing build. Like we've got that a lot in over here with a lot of tribes that have gotten land back through the Waitangi Tribunal. Where they have used it to build like community centers, like community housing and things like that. And it's like I think it's really good because it kind of shows that it's like these things can be done. And like each of these, like even like these separate iwi that have made claims have done this thing have the fraction of the budget of like an actual, like a government or something like that. It would be extremely easy. Like people talk about like the costs and all this kind of stuff, but the only reason that houses cost what they do and that we're having this, like runaway housing market is because of the way that we view houses as a commodity. And that ties into everything from like, like obviously the speculative nature and stuff like that. But when they're building things, like the way that zoning laws work and all this kind of things, they're always considering like, oh, like we have to consider the market of buyers for the amount of like what kind of housing you're gonna build and all this kind of shit like that, and it's ridiculous. And it's like
show me the market, show it.
Yeah, exactly. You know what I mean? Like like all these things come back to like this market-based economy and everything like that. So I think like like a lot of people don't necessarily see the connection between like like I would say it's more people that are still on like consider themselves like progressive leftists or something like that, as opposed to people that are like communists and stuff. But I think that's like a big like that's a real I'm gonna say a red pill moment or whatever like that when you see how all these things are connected, and it's like, oh, okay, well the only thing we can do is communism or something like
well,
that.
I think it's important to mention. Oh, sorry, go on, Soph.
Well, it's a quick thing. The way I would describe it is like it's like people think it's the market that like it's like market forces that draw people into cities, and the urbanist perspective I think could be summarized by saying no, it's humans who make cities full. It's the market that makes houses empty, right? It's only market forces that wind up with these places completely deserted.
And I just want to point out, Cradbabe says, I don't like this real land back distinction. It sort of accepts the framing of certain leftists who think land back is some like ethnic cleansing. I think it is a distinction that we do have to make because there are liberal land back movements at the moment. There are very and it's something like the same with like decolonization stuff. Land back is becoming a buzzword, and like there are people these days that are like like they are trading off of it without actually engaging with what it's supposed to be about and stuff. So I don't think like the ethnic cleansing stuff is like just a dumb Twitch meme. Like no one seriously thinks that outside of like the fucking like people
extremely
that
online
are just not to be taken seriously
assholes,
anyway. But in the real world, like this is a thing that people are discussing. We're having these discussions in like actual between actual organizers and people, like out like in the community working on these things. And it's kind of like this thing where there's a moment where you go, do we decry these movements, or do we try to radicalize them to,
Right, yeah.
sort of thing? And
that's the thing that comes up. That's the thing that's been coming up in organizing interviews. Is like I've talked to a few different organizers who are part of groups who've been part of like much bigger organizations, like say the DSA, who they're bigger, so they're slower moving, and they're in many senses quite liberal. And so at some point there's like a splinter point where you're just like, actually, I need to get out of here.
Yeah. Like there's a lot of people that are just like, oh, we want like land back just so that we can have nice houses and then we're done, sort of thing. And it's kind of like, no, it's like, no, the whole thing is like, it's all or nothing, right? Like,
yeah.
But
nice.
Anyway, sorry, that was just I just wanted to point that out because it is something that
it's important.
Like, we have to be aware of.
It's
That's
good.
important.
Anyway,
I was just gonna say
what were we saying?
I was just gonna say. Yeah, I was just going to say, I think it's important to like, so, if people are having a hard time like visualizing this about how this like, well, how can we just like house everyone? It just seems impossible. It's important to look at countries, again, I'm going to shout out Cuba, outside of the imperial core, where it's literally the rate of homelessness is 0%. There's no homeless people in Cuba. Housing is a right from the day you are born. And real estate companies are desperately trying to fuck with that in Cuba at the moment. They're like one of the only companies that are allowed to operate within Cuba. And Cuba sadly like desperately need it because it's like, fucking impossible for them to like have a decent economy. Again, an economy. They're forced to have an economy, and it's impossible for them to have a decent one under the embargo.
Right.
So yeah, real estate companies are trying to make this a lot harder, but housing is a right in Cuba. So it's entirely doable. It's entirely possible. It's entirely feasible. Anyone who tells you otherwise, don't bother. Like that, it's just no. Sorry, your opinion is so invalid. Like it's totally possible.
Yeah. It's it's one of the things where it's like people don't like, even though housing is a human right or whatever like that, people don't seriously consider it like that. Like they just like people like, oh, like water, of course, water, like all these things we need to survive. But it's like, no, like housing is absolutely like crucial to living like like a good life or whatever.
If you don't have a house, you'll just fucking die eventually.
It's
pretty how it is.
I was saying a while ago, like if we, there's always this dystopian trope of like assuming that like a super smart AI would have these assumptions built into it that are very capitalist, and that it would end up like killing us all. Like I think Tom Scott did a thing that was about like a dystopia where like an AI wipes everyone's memories in order to defend copyright or something like that. And I was saying like if you take the opposite assumption, you just start with something like fully, defending someone like people's needs instead, right? You would end up with a communist utopia. Like if you can tell a little like sci-fi story where an AI is just like programmed like protect people's health, and then it ends up like giving everyone houses, giving everyone food, giving everyone not having those things is pretty bad for your health. You know what I mean? I see Amy is waiting in the waiting room.
Amy's ready.
What's the word? Bookkeeping, is that good? I don't know.
Bookkeeping, housekeeping.
There you go. There it is. Nicole, at the end of this stream, I want to play a clip that is in the notes. I will get you the link and I'll tell you the timestamp when we got to do it. But it's from a little thing I will talk about later. There's this really cool movie, and I'll talk about it later. But basically, it's really compounding just like this need for housing and just people's basic needs. And it's a really, really cool clip from a movie called Rompiendo Puertas, which I will talk about later. But shall we bring in our guest?
Sure.
Yeah.
Cool.
Let's do it.
We have to rearrange stuff on the overlay, of course, because I haven't implemented my fix for it. Although I do think we found a fix for it, so that's good.
Oh, nice.
Okay.
Yeah.
So here's AmyeC3.
Hi.
Amy.
Hey.
Amy.
Hi.
Hey, what's up?
Hi.
Oh, nothing much.
Well, Nicole is rearranging the overlay. We're having slight technical issues. So Amy, why don't you introduce yourself and tell us, why are you here to talk to us about squatting today?
Hi, my name is Amy. I'm a housing advocate here on Twitch. I tend to talk a lot about housing policy and homelessness. Squatting does come up in conversation from time to time, especially because there's very little squatting rights here in this country. Some of the most progressive policies we have in this country is in Philadelphia, which is why I kind of wanted to talk about it, because there's been a few wins in Philadelphia that
Hell yeah.
I think shows that there's a little bit more hope for activism to garner some city response that we've definitely seen in Philadelphia that we haven't seen in places like California, where there is a housing crisis, an epidemic of sorts, where affordability is becoming so difficult. People are experiencing homelessness at a rapid rate.
Mm-hmm.
And, looking at some progress that was made with Moms for Housing, but that was only one small instance of some sort of victory.
Mm-hmm.
I'm loving
But
everything
it's
you're
still-
saying, but you're also throwing a lot of stuff out fast. Could you tell chat about Moms for Housing in case people don't know at all what that is?
Yeah, so Moms for Housing is actually a organization that stemmed from Oakland, California, where 4 families started to occupy a privately owned house owned by Wedgwood Properties. It's a huge real estate speculative company that looks to buy foreclosed homes for very cheap, flip them, and then put them back onto the market and make a profit from the investments that they have made. It's a very common practice that we have in house flipping and real estate speculation. Moms for Housing said, we're going to occupy this house. We have kids. We need to do what's best for them. And it was a long-standing legal battle. They even brought militarized police to respond to the mothers and the children who were staying there and forcibly remove them. Because it received so much attention, there was a lot of public pressure to make some sort of negotiation or arrangement, and ultimately it was eventually transferred. The house was transferred to a CLT, I believe, and it is now a place where Moms for Housing kind of runs their business to continue on with the work that they created, and that's great. It was a huge win.
Yeah.
How long did
But
that,
it's only
how
one of
long
the
did it
only
take?
examples of a win in California.
Like
That's great.
for the entire process, how long were they like squatting for the entire period? Like because I know there's a lot of laws about like how long it has to be before you can get transferred.
I believe they were only occupying the house for 2 months,
Oh,
if I'm
wow.
not mistaken. Yeah, it was a very quick process where they tried to forcibly remove them.
Oh,
I think it's because Wedgwood Properties was looking to start the process of renovation, and the battle to reclaim the house successfully was much longer than the time they were spending under no assumption in the home.
yeah.
In terms of how any movement that we have seen in the last couple years is the direct result of a massive real estate takeover by Wall Street, because they found a way to capitalize on the entire subprime mortgage collapse. And our struggles as renters are reaching new heights because we are now beholden to the same mercy of our landlords, but our landlords happen to be Blackstone or other private equity firms that are not at all interested in the reason why you can't pay rent. You will just experience eviction. So what I think is really interesting too, to talk about the way that massive swaths of people, I mean, dispersed throughout the entire country, are experiencing eviction, and how we've started to see, especially in California, this new move to create informal settlements, the kind that you would see in Mumbai. Roughly 1 billion people live in slums anyway. I know that's a dirty word, so I try to use informal settlements in discussing the subaltern class, which is really broken down very well by Ananya Roy at UCLA. She has translated a lot of Gramsci to her own way of describing the subaltern class and the informal settlements. That is the direct result of those who were either resisting neocolonialism or outright rejected from society, because neocolonialism only covers so much ground in providing natives with an opportunity to integrate into the new iteration of society that the colonizers rather have created, and that has led to a massive number of local residents who have lived there their entire lives displaced at the hands of colonizing, and neocolonialism in the form of gentrification is becoming, I think, a little bit more, it kind of hit the mainstream. It's kind of like a meme concept, but it really does tell a lot about where people are right now in experiencing displacement or getting priced out because there is a new owner who is raising rents. And during the pandemic, rents in the last year has gone up in some cases by like 30-40%,
Jesus.
depending on where you are in the world or in the country. And that is quite telling of a future that could come if there is no appropriate response to the growing number of people who are getting priced out because they can't afford to pay the rent that is, arbitrarily set, and the consequences of not paying your rent is to be forcibly removed.
Yeah, it's illegal. Well, I mean, it's illegal to not have a job. Like if you can't pay your rent, eventually cops show up and try and remove you. It's illegal to not work, and I feel like there's a name for a system where it's illegal to not work. But anyway, I don't want to get crass. But yeah, I think that's
we'll get banned for that if you mention it. Like the way Twitch is.
Yeah. I don't want to actually accidentally like pop off and say the C word or something. No, I think that's super fascinating, Amy. That's really, really interesting. Who was it you said who's been doing the translating Gramsci?
Ananya Roy, UCLA. She has the Inequality Project at UCLA. She also is playing a crucial role in having these conversations about the proliferation of unhoused individuals taking matters into their own hands and creating these informal settlements. You'll see a lot of them in Oakland, California, and various parts of Los Angeles. In fact, that's kind of how Skid Row became Skid Row, where unhoused encampments started to form, and the city just kind of like surrendered a part or a block of the city to the unhoused instead of giving each individual the opportunity to have permanent supportive housing. They just decided to allow this entire group to congregate and have what might be considered self-determination, but they are still subjected to awful treatment and lack of resources and no real agency. The number of people who die per day in Los Angeles, if they are experiencing homelessness, is up to 5 people a day. So that's more than that's more than any other city. That's more than New York, more than in Seattle, for example. And so yeah, it's becoming really problematic to see how more and more people are experiencing homelessness. Sometimes they're still working, they're employed, they're just literally priced out of their homes. So there's actually quite a high number of people who are continuing to work while experiencing homelessness in LA County.
Yeah. It's like,
so it's not like they're not productive members of society. They are. They're doing everything right. They're not doing anything.
I mean,
wrong.
not that you should be made homeless for not being productive, right? Like disabled
like
people,
rule,
elderly, children. Exactly, yeah, and that's why the social contract should be ripped into little pieces, and I should eat it.
Yeah.
We have a problem with that over here as well, because the rental costs have gone way up, as well as the housing prices and stuff, and there's been just people. Initially started seeing these stories about people living in garages, people renting them out as well, like 4 or 5 families to live in. And then it's, the stories started coming out of people just living in cars. And that's been a thing. And even through, the lockdowns with COVID and stuff like that, there were like people living in their cars. And there's people still going to work and doing their jobs and everything like that. They have kids that go to school and stuff, but they just sleep in their car, and it's like that's for a little while. Like it seemed like for a while it was such an unavoidable issue that something was going to happen. But it's like one of those things, like it's just like they get a bunch of clicks off it, they put it in the newspaper for a little while and stuff like that, and then something else happens and they move along and people just kind of get left behind. There's like a bunch of groups that have done a lot of good work in that area, but it's like one of those things where it's like it's all so tied in at the moment, especially like with our housing market and how fucked it is, that
Yeah.
to even like get these politicians to actually talk about it, like they just, like they won't even bring it up, or like, like a huge thing was a capital gains tax for us because of the, like it is the average house goes up in value by so much every year at the moment that people are making just huge amounts of capital gains. So we were gonna bring in a capital gains tax, which we don't have, so that all of this additional untaxed income they would actually have to pay, some tax on it, and it would be less.
So did you bring it in?
No, well, so the thing is, we did a referendum on it, and it was like
Oh.
it looked like it was like a non-binding referendum, and everyone was like, yes, do the capital gains tax, because obviously there's like a lot fewer landlords than there are normal people. And then the government looked at it and said, well, we've listened to the people and we've decided that it's not the right time to do a
Wow.
capital gains tax. And then you like look at all these
Crazy.
politicians, and they're like, their real estate portfolios are huge. There's like
Mhm.
a couple. Like, I mean, we're a small country. We don't have that many people in parliament, but there's like ministers that have like over 200 properties and things like that.
Jesus
It's
Christ.
like, of course they're not going to vote against their own interests.
Yeah.
Like,
We had a thing. Had a thing a few years ago now, which like people in the UK know this instantly by the word Grenfell. But basically, what happened was that there was a housing tenement block called Grenfell Tower, which because it had cladding on the outside, which was highly flammable and had been highlighted multiple times to the owners that was not okay and like not safe, and to the council as well, and just been completely ignored by everybody. And then there's this huge fire where like dozens and dozens and dozens of people died, and all the survivors had nowhere to live because their houses fucking burnt down. And there are people who are still homeless now whose house got burned up in the Grenfell fire, and like they don't do shit about it. I was going to say what you were saying about like people renting out small spaces is one of the sickest elements of like capitalism today. Is like at the same time you will have like, we talk a lot about GRT people like trying to live nomadically who live in a caravan or whatever, and they are horribly stigmatized, and police show up to try and evict them everywhere they go, and like there's horrible racism against travelers. And then at the same time a whole ton of places, like including like architecture magazines and shit, will be like, check out this new trend of micro homes. It's so innovative, ways that people are disrupting the real estate market by creating tiny housing. And it's just like fucking, you going this hard after travelers. Also, I mean, at the same time, this is a point I wanted to bring up earlier. In the autonomous city, Alexander Vasudevin brings up like in the introduction, Folkets in Copenhagen, which like they were squatting there to use it as a community center to like bring people together and just like have a community space, like a real community space, not a simulation of one. And it was a squat, and the police in Copenhagen used a counter-terrorism unit to get them out. Like dropped in by helicopter onto the roof, used quick cement to seal all the doors so none of the squatters could escape prosecution, and like tear gassed the entire building. Like so deeply fucked. And I feel like that shows incredibly well how threatening squatting and other challenges to private property are to the system.
Yeah, like they literally just fucking did a Judge Dredd on them just for living in an empty building, It's fucking ridiculous.
Exactly.
And that's like the thing, right? It's like you can see by the disproportionate response how threatening it is to the status quo, because like if a bunch of people just start squatting and they do it successfully, and then people start reporting on it, then other people are going to see it and be like, oh shit, like they just did that. And then,
that's what I'm saying about like
before,
the growth of the revolutionary society. Genuinely, a ton of people, when asked if there was a rent strike going on, would you do it, are like, fuck yes, of course I would. They would just live in their house without paying rent. And if living in a rented accommodation without paying rent, unless that's just with the landlord's permission, is squatting, or and just like taking the housing that you need to have. There was I want to read another really quick quote in this book, which I really, really liked, which was
and then after that, I
want
to do a quick
what I
poll
mentioned
for chat. So
sure. Something I mentioned earlier, which was, and then hopefully maybe we can move on to a kind of discussion of like how to support squatters, because I feel like that's something that we should like grab this conversation towards.
100%.
So this is to do with what I mentioned earlier, Henri Lefebvre's concept of the right to the city, right? So according to the investigative journalist Robert Neuwirth, it is in fact squatters who give some reality to Henri Lefebvre's loose concept of the right to the city. They are, quote, they are excluded, so they take, he writes, but they are not seizing an abstract right, they are taking an actual place, a place to lay their heads. Like, people just intrinsically know that they got to have this thing, they got to have housing, so they're just taking it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's wild.
Yeah.
So
Wait,
also
quick poll.
oh, sorry,
quick
I just
poll
want to
time.
point out something really
Yeah,
quick.
go ahead,
It's
go
like
ahead.
not an extra point. So the company that that produced the cladding for Greenfell.
Grenfell, yeah.
Grenfell, I can't remember the name, Iconic, I think, or something like that. They
Something like that, yeah.
also produced drones. Some of the ones that were used to afterwards to investigate the building, to see what went wrong and all this kind of stuff. But also this whole thing where it's like afterwards they pushed it really hard as like, this is why we need, like emergency services need drones and things to be able to kind of, like monitor everything and get in there and all this kind of shit like that.
I'm
Which
gonna
is just
turn
like
to
this
the
whole
well,
thing.
that's why I brought
I'm
up
gonna turn to the
Grenfell in the
Joker.
first place, was because you said about like MPs. Sorry, you said about elected officials who are property developers and they have investment portfolios in real estate. The number of Tory landlords is in the Tory party. MPs who are elected who are landlords has increased since the Grenfell fire, and and not small scale landlords either, but landlords who are renting on the scale of like they own a whole fucking building like that, and they're literally installing the same cladding onto buildings that they could make illegal to prevent fires like that.
It's like there's so much to go into this, like the same company, they like run like they run classes to teach BIPOC kids how to operate drones and shit like that. It's just like, wow, like if you really want to do something that's gonna like help out Black, Indigenous people of color and shit like that, you could maybe like stop making a product that like fucking burns them to death, but whatever.
Nicole,
and
you wanted
they
to make a poll,
sell
right?
stuff to Israel and stuff.
So
Exactly,
now that chat, I hope, has a little better acquainted with the concept of squatting. Can we quickly define squatting? Squatting is basically sitting in a property that you don't own and just
I did a little drawing. I did a little drawing.
Oh,
what's the drawing?
It says
squatting. It's really cool.
Really cool.
That's not really a definition, but I mean it's true.
Squatting.
Not cringe.
Not cringe. Okay.
Not cringe.
Okay, chat. Did you all get that? Chat has a really hard time understanding not cringe.
It wasn't it?
It's chat. Chat will fit.
I did a lot of work this week. This is the most
Amy,
work
could
I've
you
done.
give us a
really
really good definitive definition
very short one, so we
squatting?
can
A concise but good one.
I would say squatting is the technically illegal occupancy of taking over either state or privately owned property that is sitting vacant, not offering any utility, and could be working to further enrich the landlord class as a vehicle investment that will generate property once it is rehabilitated and put onto the market. And you're simply taking over a building to stop the vicious cycle of tenancy or predatory investment that is to the detriment of working class folk, and it's class solidarity to stand in the way of this process coming to fruition. So to reiterate the point of squatting is based and not cringe, I would like to say it might be your duty as a comrade
I like that a lot.
to squat in a vacant property if you are willing to go through the legal ramifications that will most likely come your way. But it takes a very brave person to stand up to this vicious cycle, and I commend anyone who was willing and ready and able to do so.
Or a lot of desperate people.
Yeah, because sometimes it's not like they're willing, it's like they have to, or else they perish.
I just want to quibble the technically illegal thing, because I do think, like, as I highlighted earlier with the squatter's handbook, there are cases where we could call something squatting, but it is still technically allowed by law, even though like landlords absolutely hate it. The landlord class absolutely hate it. Like it is against what like the law is being designed to try and like, it's against the side that the law is on for sure.
Yeah.
But there are like cases where you can like loophole through it or whatever. And like that doesn't make that
and
not
that's happened in
squatting.
Philadelphia. If I may, I can like go over, because I kind of read over the crux of the case of it's the state Supreme Court case, the city of Philadelphia versus Galdo.
When was this?
And this was there was a case that began in 2014.
Okay.
And it eventually made it to the Supreme Court case. It made it to the Supreme Court. It went through appellate court. And basically, the city of Philadelphia had exercised eminent domain to build out a highway, or rather a freeway system to connect I-95 to what is called the Delaware Freeway. And they bought a whole bunch of property. And then after the construction of the freeway system, there were existing lots that sat vacant for literally years. And some guy started to use the property, kind of turned it into like a little bit of a communal space. People would park their cars there. And in 2013, the city tried to reclaim it, recoup it, and put it back into the hands of a private developer. And the person who appealed the case, claiming that the city didn't have a right to own the land and was immune to the adverse possession of the land because they did not fulfill their obligation to make the plot of land accessible or for public use. And so eventually there was a Supreme Court decision that ruled in favor of the defendant, if you will, the person who was trying to keep the plot of land. And he won the case because the city just sat on that vacant property. They were only going to sell it back to the private developer to increase their tax revenue. And local courts essentially ruled in favor of the city, stating that they were able to hold on to the land and do nothing with it. And it was completely legal, did not constitute the same kind of outcome that would give them reason to have ownership of the land, since it was not used for the public. It was just sitting there.
Yeah.
And that does happen, especially in areas that have city-owned lots that are currently not under any sort of use whatsoever.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think there's some people asking in the chat, like, so is squatting relating to residing somewhere, or can you just make the space into something else? Like, it kind of depends on where you are. Like, I know I think in New Zealand you have to be occupying that space for it to legally get transferred into ownership for you. You have to be occupying that space as a residence for like 20 years, and then it can get shifted over to you, but you can't even leave for like, you know, more than a week or so at any given time in that whole thing. And you can't get anyone else to come in and, you know, like house sit it for you or whatever. You have to be there the entire time. Which means that, down here, there hasn't been many wins for squatters down here. But an interesting thing I found, though, is that a guy in Australia, the most recent win that I could find for squatter over there, was kind of not a win at all. It was a guy that he was already a landlord, owned a bunch of houses, noticed that a house was empty in an area, the door was off its hinges, went in, found out that the person that lived there had died, and he basically just got a locksmith in, changed the locks, and started renting it out, and so became the landlord of this property. And he actually was able to take it into court, and he won. But it
that's
was
not a
because
win for squatters.
he was operating it as a business, you know, like and so that
Christ.
counted for him, which is like a real ratchet thing to do. And if you look up the dude, he's got like a bunch of, you know, he's been in the news a bunch of times for doing dodgy shit like that. But so because he was operating a business in that time, it counted, even though he wasn't physically at the address. that kind of thing. So you really got to look into what works for you.
Can I say, like, when people say like this, the introduction that I wrote, right, like leftist slogans like property is theft, people don't necessarily click with that, like what it means. But like that example where a landlord rocked up to a place where like it was empty and because someone had died, and he just took it and then just started charging people money to be there.
It's
right?
smart though. It's a smart business decision.
All landlords, and the entire history of colonialism and capitalism, and before that feudalism, is literally that. And that's why people say
100%.
Property is theft. Like there might be other steps involved, like it's a different guy who finds the place to and the other guy inherits it or whatever, other steps, but the story boils down to the same thing. Some fucking dickhead just walks up to a place and is like, this is mine now, and then people have to pay money to be there from then on. That's why property is theft.
That is like the purest dissection or like representation of like private property, essentially, with regards to like housing. Some asshole shows up to something that isn't theirs, and they go, "This is mine now, and if you want it, you have to pay me." But those things are like necessary to live for the rest of everyone. Everyone's like, I have to have that or else I die. Like, well, I was the first asshole, so now you have to fucking be a slave somewhere. Give me your slave wages, blah 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 blah, or else I get to like make your family suffer. So you have to go through me. That's like the purest.
Nicole, you said you wanted to do a poll, right?
Yeah, I wanted to say. Okay, so like so like the most brief way that I can understand squatting, just to have like a really brief sentence, because I know chat gets kind of distracted sometimes. Chatters, my sweet little chatters, at least. I can't speak for the other Red Planet viewers, but my sweet little chatters. Squatting to me is residing in a property, like living in a place without paying rent when you're supposed to actually probably pay rent. Like somebody's place that they own it, and you just go like a home that is empty, but if the landlord doesn't rent it actively, you're still just showing up there and you're living there, and that's supposed to be like a property that's sold to somebody. But you're like,
the legal name, which like Amy said earlier, is adverse possession. And in a way that name, because there are a few different names, like I know that in the Netherlands they call it cracking, for example, which I love that name because it's kind of like it's this thing and then you crack it and now it's like different. But like I find the term adverse possession really helpful for understanding what squatting fundamentally is, because it's like the law defines it right as being like an opposite way, an unusual way, an aggressive way of owning something, right? What the way the law likes for people to own stuff is the capitalist way, and fundamentally it's like claiming a property or land in a human way, like just a way that is counter to that system. And I think that's maybe the shortest definition we could get. Like, it's just
that adverse position is quite important. A lot of the time, like over here, it's really important if you're a squatter to prove adverse possession, that you've been there for 20 years or whatever. And so that means that you have to have shown that you've been like maintaining the house. You haven't just been like leaving it to fall apart. You've done things to really make sure that, like,
which is ironic because landlords don't do that shit either.
I know, yeah, exactly right. It's like you basically have to prove that it is a benefit for like this house or for that area to have you in there maintaining this house or whatever. And I think Pixel Cooker in the chat also mentioned property taxes involved also, which is a thing in some places. If you successfully squat a place, they can hit you with the property tax for the period that you have been there as well, which is like super dog shit. But it's a thing that in some states in America and stuff, it's a thing. And I think in Australia, in one of the states of Australia, you have to do it as well, which is something that I dug up when I was looking for this. So that's another thing where it's like you kind of have to it's like all these ways that you have to prove legitimacy to the state by like jumping through these like ridiculous hoops of like like what a good tenant or a good landowner does or whatever. And it's like, man, like I've never had a landlord that fixed up a house or whatever like that, like it's
imagine a world where landlords have to prove they are fixing up the house
exactly, like
fucking imagine.
Like landlords don't have to jump through the same hoops, like it's anyway, sorry.
Okay, so all I want to know is I want to chat to, now that you, I think, understand what squatting is. I want to know if any of you are realizing that you've actually squatted before. Does anyone here be like, well, actually, I did squat. I did live in a property without paying
So
rent.
we were actually really close to. I want to say this, like we were actually really close to squatting because we like Nat and I like had a really bad living situation where somebody basically like in this place, my ex moved out very suddenly and left us high and dry. And how it ended up getting resolved was that a very rich friend just was like, here, have a bunch of money and pay 6 months up front and then you can pay it back to me. And it was like an amicable kind of loan situation. But before that became an option, Nat and I were like increasingly seriously just like, yeah, like we're just gonna stay. We'll just fucking stay here. Like, so we kind of came like that close. Like when I say the very rich friend, like they're my friend now, but they got in touch to make that offer because I was complaining about it on Twitter. We didn't have, as far as we knew, like any kind of backup, and it was so close, but like not the practicalities of squatting. So
there is one thing that I'd like to share, and this is my only experience with anything to do with a squat ever. Really close to me, round the corner, there is a old theatre, and it used to be squatted. It was squatted by a bunch of people. I knew a bunch of people in those in the squat, all very sound people, and I am a videographer by trade. I film stuff, edit it for freelance kind of thing. And one day I was approached by this person who I knew had a couple of mutual friends with me, who also was a squatter. He was squatting in another building somewhere with a bunch of people, and he wanted to get us together, sit down in a pub, and talk about sorting out these fake squatters. So, by the way, this is not like I'm not sat here being like, oh my god, squatting is really bad. This is sort of an anecdote to tell you things to kind of look out for if you're gonna get involved in squatters movements, because this is a legit thing that happened to me. This guy said to me, everyone in that squat at the theater is a pedo. Source, just trust me, bro. We want you to come and film us in balaclavas threatening them, and that's we're gonna pay you like 500 quid for that.
Is that like
so that's a thing?
Joey Salads type?
Yeah,
douchebaggery.
No, it was even more insidious than that. The guy also said to me, "You used to train Muay Thai, right?" And I said, "Yeah." And he goes, "Well, you could probably get involved." And I said, what do you mean I could probably get involved? Like, oh, no, you could probably, like, help us beat them up if shit gets... I was like, are you serious?
What the fuck?
So,
did you take his money? Or...
Well, no, I was way too much of a baby leftist to even understand, like, how base that would be to take his money and literally not do anything. But, yeah. So, in the UK, certainly, there is a sort of contingent of people who do, like, squats for the purpose of squat raves. And it's that's fine. I guess because you're still squatting, right? And it's like I'm not gonna like gatekeep what squats are right and what squats aren't.
Yeah, of course.
But just to be mindful, chat, there are people out there who will try and exploit you and try and sort of say to you, these people aren't squatting properly. So that's why it's important for someone like Amy to be here, to be talking to us about like, the things that you need to be looking for in a movement of squatters in order to be able to if you are going to get involved with a community like that, to know what to look out for if someone is taking the piss out of you, kind of thing.
Yeah,
basically.
I've never like lived in a squat, but I've had plenty of friends that have over the years, and like it's like a thing. Like if you grow up around like like punk music and stuff like that, you always get like there'll be like the punk squat where it'll just be a bunch of people living in a flat somewhere in like a building that's probably falling apart or something like that. Like there was some I've been to some pretty derelict looking squats over the years, but it's like it's quite common, and it used to be really common in a lot of like kind of like I guess like alternative subcultures or whatever over here. But the wild thing is, so all the areas where these houses were, like this is like around like central Auckland, like Greyland and stuff. Those are all like $1 million plus properties at the moment. Like actually some of them around there would be like 1.5, maybe close to $2 million for like these places that we were hanging out in as like a squat or whatever. And some of them it's still the same building, it's just that the land has increased in value so much. So I do feel like there is this like element of squatting as like like obviously it's like resisting gentrification or whatever like that. But I feel like there's like something to be said about like people think of it just as like, oh, this is like these like like these like dirty punks are like living in these squats or whatever like that, and they're like, it's like they're just like or whatever, like they just think of them as just dumb kids or whatever like that. But these days when I see stuff like that, I think like, no, this is good. Like those, particularly like the punks that like smell and like like play their instruments like too loud late at night or whatever like that.
Absolutely.
They're keeping those property prices down.
Well, yeah, I mean,
that's
like,
really funny.
squatting as a social force is like the opposite of gentrification. No, I mean, right? Like,
Okay,
Amy, I feel like we absolutely have to get onto the topic of like how to support squats in your area, because we've not long left, right? And that's really important, isn't it?
Can we just real quick? Are y'all familiar with anal?
I've been known.
I have had sex numerous times, so I'm
you're referring to, of course, everyone here on the panel is intimately familiar with Autonomous Nation of Anarchist Libertarians. Yes,
absolutely.
Right, exactly.
Yes.
I've done that loads. I've done that loads.
So interesting to hear about the engagements with the people who are trying to take down the squatters because they are pedos. Because fascists have routinely targeted anal. So it could have very well been maybe a group of Nazis who were asking you to like use your skills to attack.
Oh yeah, they absolutely were. Yeah, 100%. Like I knew that it like not like straight away, but after sort of learning about like what squatting actually is and like how it benefits people and stuff, I was like, oh, that was completely unbased. Like what the fuck would they want to do that for? Do you know what I mean? And also like it was straight away like I knew that he was talking shit anyway, because like I said, I knew some of the people in there, and it's like, nah, they weren't pedos. Do you know what I mean?
But that's like the standard thing. Like a lot of like fashion types will be like, they love slandering like leftists and communists as like like degenerates or whatever.
Yeah. Well, it's like we've talked before on the show about how like I predict, we with anti-work, right? Like there's a mass just quitting and dropping out movement, which I think is based as hell. But I've said before that I think that like we'll see the same thing with cops. We will see a mass quit, like a mass resigning of cops, as their job more and more just becomes explicitly just to like evict people who are desperately trying to, like we were saying, Amy was saying about the subaltern class. Was it in what settlements? Informal settlements. Thank you. As cops' entire job becomes that, right? It'll become unpalatable. But like the other force alongside that is like far right groups who just like brutalize people for fun, because they just like it's their like they just fucking love to like terrorize the most vulnerable in society.
Absolutely. They take it upon themselves. We saw that time and time again with the Black Lives Matter movement. They would just show up, self-deputized, fucking Kyle, whatever.
Just
taking things upon, like, and acting like they're vigilantes, protecting property.
If the Marxist notion of like overthrowing the current power system is to seize the means of production, the fascist one fundamentally is to seize the state monopoly on violence. Like the main fascist grievance is that they don't have the state monopoly on violence, and that's why they like cry so fucking hard whenever cops are against them in the slightest. They absolutely melt down because like they hate that they don't have the monopoly on violence.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, as we saw. Sorry, go on.
I was going to say, we're kind of coming up towards the end of the stream now. So
we really desperately need to talk about
how can we support squatters, Amy? What's the best way for us to do that?
So what's really great about squatters is that they have a lot of ideas on how to go about their political activism. They're already incredibly politically active. Helping them with the technical skills or resources to get their story out, as long as it is completely 100% consensual if you are filming them, then that is actually a really good way to get eyes on the issue. So in Philadelphia, I know I keep going back to Philadelphia, but it's a really good example. Squatters who occupied a plot of land directly next to the Philadelphia's housing authority they did a 3-month-long protest where they camped out in front of PHA and demanded that they hand over unoccupied vacant housing units that were under the ownership of PHA in order to get them safely housed during the pandemic. And it was about 3 months worth of negotiations, and those who are experiencing the life of a squatter, they were at the negotiating table. And a lot of the assistance came from, organizers and activists who are also squatters. They are often called homeless activists or squatting activists because they know what they want and they have the ability to articulate their demands. It's just that they don't necessarily have the toolkit or resources that are available to give them the political agency. So the best thing that you can do is to give them your time, give them your money, set up a GoFundMe. They have everything that they need from the perspective of self-organizing and self-determination. They know what they need more than far better than any activists from an outsider perspective could offer. And giving them those tools or those resources is the best way that you can help squatters. They're already self-organized. They are already incredibly sophisticated in their way of living, and they have the ability to state their demands. They just need a little bit more financial support. And from a perspective of mutual aid, while they are collectively organizing and bargaining and they are demonstrating a protest, they need food, they need water, they might need blankets, they might need something that you can provide them materially. And that all comes through having some sort of rapport that might require a little bit of trust. If you are going to act as an advocate on their behalf and help them and listen to them and respect their wishes or their needs and kind of follow by their lead. I think a lot of times we think we have to impose upon a movement our own beliefs, and that's probably the worst thing that you could do if you are trying to truly help somebody or a group that you are not necessarily familiar with or have the same experience with.
Yeah.
You should be taking a back seat and listening to what they want you to do instead of what you think you should be doing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it's a very good advice that I think many of us could benefit from. The taking a back seat and not trying to
don't co-opt it.
Don't co-opt it. Don't show up and be like, now that I'm here, this is my moment to show to me and whoever else that I'm in fact a hero or whatever. We talk about this with revolution.
I'm the king of the squats.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This idea of the revolution is when my moment I charge. It's this very individualist thing, and I think it's important that we note and again, this is a radical shift, but we are trying to build a movement of it that is not one person who gets that's not not one person that gets all the fame and whatever. This is nobody should have you shouldn't have the hero and then everyone else is just oh yeah, I guess that's great, thank you. I'm not explaining myself well. I've had half a beer, so excuse me.
No, that's not really good, because a lot of people do want to have that claim to not fame, but a lot of people want to be able to have what they think is the proper response to their involvement.
Yeah,
and it's it's a thankless task, and if you are going into any kind of organizing effort to receive some sort of praise that you think that you are deserving of, then don't show up, because you're just going to be rubbing people the wrong way.
Yeah, again, I'll reiterate, another staple of our show, copy our show. You know what I mean? Do what we're doing, kind of thing. It's so important to, absolutely. The movement is all of us.
Yeah,
all across the
absolutely.
world. Every single
one thing I'm curious about is I'm on the verge of should we suggest for the homework people find out about local squats if they want. Maybe that's a bonus extra homework people could do, but maybe it's not the main one. But what I wanted to ask was, because I realized that I don't know this, Amy, is there a way people can find is there a resource that people kind of, like log, maps or anything, or do you just have to like know the neighborhood and know that people are there? Like, is there a way to know?
It's also very
about-
location
about-
dependent. So, because Amy's
I
out
think
of
a lot of
California.
squatters do not want to be known. Like
Yeah.
they
That
are
makes
trying
sense.
very, very hard to like fly under the radar. And only
makes sense.
whenever there's a dire situation, like with Occupy PHA in Philadelphia, it came down to a life or death crisis, and a lot of individuals who were starting to be forcibly removed, they had to act very swiftly. And because there's been a long-standing history of activists fighting directly with the city, with the vacant city-owned properties, that did kind of, I think that kind of reignited a former flame that had already existed in
Mhm.
Philadelphia that was much easier to kind of pick up where they had left off. And I think a lot of these squatter movements that are happening on a case-by-case basis, they're not well known because there's no existing. So to answer your question, there is no real network in place that if there were, it could easily be weaponized and then
Yeah.
utilized by like real estate groups and the local police that could make any like way of any means of communicating much more difficult, or put them in even more risk, or like
That makes
jeopardize
sense.
them even
That's
more.
what I figured.
you
That's
know?
really unfortunate,
I
but that does
think-
make sense.
Yeah.
I think what we so like I knew about the squat round the corner from me, not necessarily because it was round the corner from me, but because of my involvement as a DJ in the rave scene, in the local rave scene. And as Tim was saying before, it in New Zealand, it's like punks, right? It's like, so, you know, they're musicians as well. So maybe a good way to find a squat in your area could be check out the local music scene. Specifically, like if there's punks, if there's, you know, a rave scene in the UK that you know of and stuff, maybe you're gonna find a squat that way, you know, because that's I still, like, in people contacts that I have from those days, you know, like ex partners and stuff like that, they tell me all the time, oh, I went to this squat rave in Bristol, oh, I went to this squat rave in London and stuff, you know. So you will eventually find squats that way.
And there's like occasionally you do hear
Unreliable,
things
obviously.
through I guess kind of like lefty channels, you know, like that. Like, you know, if you're involved with an organization, there might be someone who is, you know, involved with a squat or something like that. Even if it's like not, you know, directly like living there, they might be like, hey, we're aware of these people, this, you know, like they're squatting here, and there may be a day where we have to kind of show up for them or something like that. Like I've heard of you know, squats and stuff just through kind of like back channels and stuff, where people be like, you know, yeah, maybe like something's happening over here, so we just, like, even though what they're doing is like, it's not, they don't see it as a political act, they're just people that are like living in a house or whatever like that.
Yeah.
And, you know, like it aligns with our kind of things to, you know, like stand up for them if they need it, if something's going to happen or something like that.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
There are a couple of comments in chat, one from
yeah.
Supreme H Court and one from Rinky Dink, that I think mesh well together and form a good point.
Cool.
Supreme H Court said, I think being involved with tenants unions could help people squatting, and that is true from two sides. Like someone, like, as I said before, like one form of squatting is where people are living in a place and then they try to get evicted. Like, you know, the landlord tries to evict them, and then if they resist eviction, they are then squatting if they're not paying rent. And Rinky Dink says, probably the best thing that communities can do to make squatting more supported is to normalize eviction resistance.
Yep.
If you have large numbers that willing to resist tenant evictions, then squatters are more likely to reach out for eviction resistance support. Make all eviction resistance more normal and visible, and it makes everyone safer. And again, that's kind of why I floated earlier the idea of like getting in touch with your neighbors, just go and introduce yourself to your neighbors. Take baked goods if you want to be a real, you know, real wholesome but whatever. But like, you know, just go and say hi, right? Because if there was the possibility of a rent strike in solidarity with people, or a rent strike just to resist, you know, or whatever, knowing your neighbors and organizing together with, like, knowing your neighbor's name and then knowing your name is the absolute first step. If they're like, for me, I've been meaning to go and meet my neighbors for a really long time, just because I'm a trans woman, and like if I if I'm worried that there could be horrible fascist goons in the neighborhood, right, who would want to kick my head in, like, I feel like if I knew my neighbors' names and they knew my name, then at least it wouldn't be them who would be the people I should worry about, because like they would have at least had like a bare minimum of 5-minute conversation with me. Which is something to consider as well.
Yeah, it's one of those things as well where it's like, when you, like, if you're in trouble, if you're at your house or anything like that, or if something's going on, or even if you just need help with something, you know, like if you don't know your neighbors, you're not going to be like, oh, I should go see Joe next door or whatever like that. You're going to be like, okay, I've got to call like a friend who might live like 20 minutes away or something like that, you know, like that. So I think it's always good, you know, just to be like, if you're living in an apartment building or something like that, to know people around you or whatever. And it's even if it's just as simple as like, you know, like, oh, I need to borrow a screwdriver or something like that. But, you know, like it could be like, hey, look, you know, like, you know, you might be like, there's some people that have like threatened me or something like that. If you see anyone coming around the neighborhood, you know, that they look like they might be vaguely fashy or some shit like that. Like, you know, if you know someone, then, you know, you can, it's a lot easier to have those conversations.
Yeah, you can start leading into community defense organizing as well as other kinds of organizing. Yeah, I mean, meeting your neighbors leads into all sorts of kinds of organizing, and just being in community with people. And that's something we've highlighted, right, is like how much our modern environment has been designed to alienate us and keep us from knowing other people. And I don't want to just sound like love and sunshine is the answer to everything, but like I do think that people need to understand the genuinely radical potential of being in community with people who live physically close to you, because like it sounds like it's nothing, but it's actually everything. Like,
well, Sophie,
it's guaranteed that your class interests will align to.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
Yes. I'm going to do it again. I'm going to mention Cuba. Going back to what Nicole was saying. I know.
Goddamn
going
tanky mule shilling for big Cuba every day.
I've had it.
Can't believe it. Going back to what Nicole was saying about her mom earlier on, in that like during COVID and the pandemic, she's really been struggling, you know, due to a lack of community and stuff like that. Like this is something that is, you know, totally flipped on its head in Cuba, right? You know what I mean? It's like the community is like fucking everything. And it sounds actually very similar in a way to what you were talking about, Tim, in that like, you know, Maori people will like, you know, live in a community and that shit is like the basis of society, rather than just like, oh, well, you know, sometimes we need to go to the pub kind of thing. And yeah, it is like so based to see like the positive elements of that in Cuba. Because of the embargo and shit, they find it hard to like get games and like set up gaming connections. But people in towns and cities in Cuba have literally created local intranets where they just have massive fucking LAN parties together. Like it's absolutely sick. Like
same thing in Ukraine and Czechia for a long time back in the day and stuff, like these gigantic like, you know, small intranets.
Wait till Cyberpunk 2022 comes out, and that's exactly one of my prescriptions, is that that's literally what we need to do.
Just what we need to do is become gamers. LAN party.
We need to seize the means of communication by creating our own internet that is not state controlled. Is the you know.
We need our own WoW private servers. That's what we need.
Yes, okay, no. When you put it that way, now I think about it, actually, World of Warcraft is probably the way to communism. Actually,
absolutely.
That's right. You got it.
Should we get into homework and stuff then?
We're overtime. We're getting overtime now.
Yeah, because we're over time, and I've got to go get boosted soon. So.
Oh shit! Okay, cool.
How's your kitten, by the way?
So,
how's little kitten?
Chat, who remembers?
I that's where I disappeared a little bit earlier because I had some banging around, but no, she's good. She's good. She's doing good.
So, chat, who remembers the homework from last week?
Chat.
1 PS.
No, don't
0
one. No. They're gonna just press.
Wait,
one.
what? Wait, no, wait. Did I do it again? Oh fuck! I'm sorry.
Say what the homework is. What was the homework?
Say what it was. Say what it was. Don't listen to me. I just draw pretty pictures. I just draw pretty pictures.
I do.
Oh dang! A couple of
people
already forgotten.
You can't just say I do. You have to say what.
Oh fuck.
Okay, so last week we were talking with FT Signifier about non-reformist reforms, policy changes which would genuinely liberate people for continued class struggle, right?
I got it.
The quick way to remember: free people, right? Yeah. So if you got, if more people get out, and then they're freed, right? And
Sorry,
so the
someone in
homework
the chat just
was to
said,
go.
learn about unions. Sorry.
that was week 1, and it wasn't even.
That was
week
number one. That was number
not
one,
even week
and it
one,
wasn't.
but-
It wasn't even what it was.
Yeah,
Sorry,
lying in
just
chat
that was
is
too
not the
funny.
homework.
Sweet little
Fucking
chat.
hell.
To learn if there were any non-reformist reforms in your kind of local policy environment. For example, for me, it would be the UK, or maybe there were possibilities of it, London, that kind of administrative level, or the whole country. And therefore, be able to identify where electoral politics is worthwhile and not bother with the rest.
Yeah.
Well, if that's your choice. So who did that? Ones, if you did that. No need to bother with zeros. We just want to see who did it. I'm just curious to see who kind of went away and engaged with that, because it was a little bit more of a technical homework than we have been giving. Like before, we had get a first aid kit and join a union and stuff like this, and it was a bit more kind of accessible for everybody. And I think that this one required a lot of learning, right?
We have 2, 3 ones.
Okay.
4.
Just a few. Good. Just a few, but that's okay. That's okay.
Yeah, exactly. Again, as I say every week, these things are ongoing things. If you didn't join a union in the first week, even if you got it wrong and you thought that it was about learning about union, you can remedy that now. You can go and do that now instead.
We just like for people to be able to take what we're talking about on the day and take it away somewhere. It doesn't have to be that you have to do it in the week. But
we would like it if you did that, and you do get a gold star.
Yeah, hopefully people who watched last week will be able to identify non-reformist reforms and not bother with the rest and recognize it as gibberish in future. But what are we setting as homework this week? What do we reckon?
I think what we were talking about before was unless Amy has any suggestions, if not, then maybe just get to know a neighbor. Get to know your neighbors.
Introducing yourself to a neighbor. It's a big one. Our last go outside and do something was not well received. People did not do it because it's scary and involves touching grass.
Actually, yeah, exactly.
But
it is. Yeah.
I want to set it. You know what? I just want to set the high bar. Let's just do it. Everybody's got to go introduce themselves to at least one neighbor.
I also want to mention
for the stars and hit the sky.
That's right. That's the saying, exactly. I also want to reiterate. I want to read a comment by my editor who wrote. I think it was my editor, Tamaki Killingbird. I can't find the comment, but basically it amounted to: if your neighbor sucks, don't be dissuaded. Some people suck. Some people are like, okay.
Yeah, that's
but
true.
there's still a lot of value in getting to know your neighbors. Please don't let that be the perma lesson of, wow, you getting to know my neighbors always goes badly. No, it's there are pieces of shit out there, and try to protect yourself. Like Sophia was saying before, being trans, it can pose another, depending on also the area that you live in, and if it's not being trans, if it's some other marginalized identity, that's always something to be aware of. I want you all to be safe first and foremost. That's important. But
yes,
also,
so can I just
Can I lay out a plan? We'll set this homework. We will say goodbye and log off, plug our stuff, disappear, and then as I said before, Nicole, I'd really like if you could show the thing I've just linked in the Shadowy Cabal group chat from timestamp 3800 to kind of until it ends. As the way to play us out, because there's an amazing clip on the end of this, and also I hope people watch the whole thing later. I'll link it in chat too.
Okay.
So should we set that as the homework? People go and meet their neighbor.
Yeah,
Again, I know nobody will, but you should give it a go. Yeah. Anyone who wants to will be very proud. You'll get a gold star.
You will get a gold star, and if you already know your neighbor, maybe speak to your neighbor about tenants unions.
Yeah.
I don't know how everybody thinks about that, but that could be pretty based.
That's
talk to them about the concept of an eviction resistance, right?
Ooh.
Okay.
All right.
Tim, I know you got to run off and get boosted. So where can people find you?
Cool. Yeah. So for those of you that have just joined us or whatever, my name's Tim. I have a YouTube channel and a Twitch channel, both called Conquest of Dread. I do video essays about this kind of thing. But when I stream, I mainly just talk shit while playing games. And while that does lead towards, lefty kind of discussions, You know, like it's not as serious as like on Red Planet, for example. And I'm over on Twitter as Dread Conquest, where I just shit post. And yeah, sweet, cool. It's been great. I think this was a really good conversation. But yeah,
Sweet.
that's me. What about you, Mule?
Me, yeah, I'm DJ Mule. I'm DJ Mule on Twitch. I do React Andy leftist content Monday to Thursday. Sometimes I play, like on Saturday, I play Bible adventure games for a laugh. That was pretty.
What?
That was
crazy.
hilarious. That
Okay,
that
I need
knocked me the
Yeah,
fuck out.
Wow,
yeah.
I need to tune
Well,
into DJ
that-
Mule stream.
Yeah.
Spicy content.
So yeah, and on Twitter I'm DJ Mule _ I just shit post on there. No, I don't. I post cool stuff. It's very based. I'm really cool. I'm a cool guy. What about our lovely guest, Amy? Where can people find you?
You can find me on twitch.tv/AmyeC3 and Twitter as well. I'm not so good at shit posting, but I do make sure I let everyone know when I go live, and that's about the extent of it that I can promise consistently. I'm also on YouTube, Housing News with AmyeC3. And those are
That's it.
probably all that matter. So.
I'm an
didn't know you
Amy
had a
sub on Twitch.
housing
by the way.
news thing. That's awesome.
Yeah, that is
Yeah.
dope.
Can we see the Amy sub
I'm
in the
looking
chat?
that up right now. That's really cool.
Are you? By the way,
Yeah,
are you gonna be streaming for a while? I think you're streaming right now, right? Are you gonna be streaming for a while?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I usually stream for like 6 hours on Sunday.
Okay. This is some interesting information. Okay.
Do with that what you will.
I'm just asking questions.
Okay.
Right. And yeah, I'm
Not for no
assuming
reason.
everyone knows where to find Bad Bunny because we're
about
currently
Sophie?
on stream. Oh yeah,
Sophie
so-
from Mars, all the stuff. Patreon.com/Sophie from Mars. That's how I pay my rent and bills and buy silly little dresses and pizza and drugs. How about we play us out, Nicole? Bye, everybody. See ya.
See ya.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks for coming. Do your homework. Hey.
All right.
Wait. Did I do that right? Am I supposed to do that? Was I supposed to leave everyone? I'm so confused. Did I do the right thing? I don't know. Wait, what's happening? Was I supposed to duck out? Was that the right decision? I don't know. I think I did it wrong. Fuck! Well, you know what? I'm sorry. I think we did it wrong. It's okay. Okay. Chat, will you forgive me? Well, I still want to watch this video. It's only for a few seconds. It's like literally for like 2.5 minutes. We'll do it live. Fuck it. We will do it live.
That's the only way. So we've been accused of political movement. Maybe it is. Maybe it's not. I don't know much about politics, but the only thing is people, this group is a group of people desperate in need of housing, and we fight it, and we try everything right into the mayors, the one before this one and the other one before the other one, and so and it didn't work. Making a picket line, making sittings, all kinds, it didn't work. So it seems that the only way was breaking into those buildings, and the next step will be not breaking into all buildings, we'll be breaking into the luxury buildings to see how they will like it. That's what I will. When they see a bunch of people, they're all right. We are risking getting arrested, but still we don't care because we are going to show them that the next quarters movement won't be in rundown buildings. It will be in fancy houses. So they know that we really mean business, because as it is now, they are scared. They are. They don't know what to do with us. We are on the driver's seat for once. We're working towards taking control of the community. We also need control in our jobs. Racial movement started with few people. It's like a little plant. You plant a little seed and you see it growing and growing and growing. And that is the first step.
That's it. That was great. Fucking badass. Fucking badass. Excuse me. Effin' badass.
And as you will soon find out, you cannot defeat an enemy that you cannot see.